All right, everyone, welcome to part two of our ABA training. Again, if you didn't see part one, my name is Lizbeth Garcia. I am a board certified behavior analyst. I have a master's of science in ABA. I'm also a mom to a child with autism, and I am an Integradora in the Amstel Valley region. So as we move on to part two, today we're going to be discussing how does ABA work. ABA looks at we use the three-term contingency, which means we look at three different areas of behavior. Behaviors don't happen at random. We know that behaviors occur in an orderly fashion. And so we want to determine the order to change the outcome, right? And we're going to go more into what this means. The three main things that I want you to be familiarized with is the term A, B, and C. A means antecedent. That means what happens before the behavior. B is what is the behavior? What does it look like? And C, what happens after the behavior? What's the consequences that are given? And when I talk about consequences, it doesn't mean punishment. Consequences just means what happens immediately after the behavior that's either maintaining the behavior or making it decrease. And we're going to go more into this in the next few slides. So the first thing we want to do is the A, right? Look for the reasons of the behavior. What happens before the behavior? Is it me telling this my child no? Is it me restricting them access from something? Is it maybe they're just overwhelmed by all the noise, the lights, the sounds? Maybe it's because they want my attention and I'm not giving them attention, right? The first things we want to know is what's triggering these behaviors from happening. That is the A, what we call in ABA as the antecedent. Now, it's very important that as we talk about what is behavior, we start to look at what, not just what we see, but what's happening underneath it, right? Which is why it's so important to identify the A, the antecedents. A lot of the times it could be maybe they're overwhelmed because they didn't get so much sleep last night. Maybe they just had a rough day in school. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're in pain. Maybe they had all these different things happen to them and they don't know how to communicate that, right? So maybe things are happening in their mind. They're having all this anxiety, all this sadness. And so all we see is this big explosion of behavior that happens. So when we're talking about antecedents or the A part of our analysis of behavior, we want to determine exactly what is happening before I see this big iceberg. What's happening underneath? Before I see the explosion of behavior, what's triggering all of these explosions or what got them to this point? So now we want to discuss the B component, right? So I've identified the triggers. I know why it's happening, what's causing this behavior to happen, or what typically happens before. I've identified those triggers. Now we want to talk about what is the behavior? How does aggression look like? How does throwing look like? What do meltdowns look like? Maybe it's more of a repetitive behavior to where they're constantly jumping all the time or they're flapping their hands. Now, these type of repetitive behaviors are not really things that we want to specifically remove from them if it's helping them being calmed down. The only time that we would typically even create a behavior intervention plan for these repetitive behaviors are if they're really impeding in their ability to learn from their environment. But if it's a behavior that they just do because it suits them, why change it? Right? When we talk about behavior, we want to talk about, again, those behaviors of concern, the ones that are really impacting their ability to learn from their environment, or the ones that are causing themselves harm or harms to others. For example, when we talk about my child is aggressive, how does that look like? Because aggression can have a variety of different ways. If you pull my hair, I can count that as aggression, right? Or maybe pushing me, I can count that as aggression. But what if you punch me, if you choke me, if you bite me, if you kick me? Is that counted as aggression? Right? So it's important that when we talk about the B component, the behavior, we create a definition or we look at the behavior and we determine exactly what it looks like so that anybody that comes in contact with my child knows exactly what that looks like. So again, behaviors of concern can be a variety of things. I've had participants bite themselves, aggress towards others, aggress towards themselves, throwing objects. A big one is meltdowns or tantrums, and there's a difference between them. A meltdown is someone can't really control themselves. They're really in this like crisis state of mind because of something that triggered them. And the tantrum is more like I'm in control. I know what I'm doing, and I know why I'm acting this way, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there. But the importance part of it is let's identify what it looks like and let's exactly describe it and see what is the behavior, why is it happening, and what does the behavior look like. Now we have our A, we know the triggers, right? We now know like what the behavior looks like. Now the job of a BCBA is to identify what happens after the behavior, right? What happens immediately after this participant is aggressive or has a meltdown or a tantrum. Is an item removed? Do they get access to an item that they've been wanting, that you told them no to? Do they get attention for engaging in these behaviors? Maybe there's no consequence immediately right after that. You can say, wow, I know exactly what happened after. Maybe it's just an automatic response that they're engaging in that we can't really physically see, but we know they're getting some type of reinforcement or something out of this behavior, right? So it's very important that when we're talking about behavior, ABA looks at these three components: the A, the B, and the C. What's happening before the behavior? What is the behavior? What's happening immediately after the behavior? Because whatever happens immediately after the behavior is going to tell us whether this behavior is going to continue to occur in the future or whether it's going to stop, right? And an example of this is, let's say I have my child and I go to the store and my child sees a candy bar and he says, I want a candy bar. And I'm like, no, not right now. You can't have candy right now. And he starts crying and screaming, but I want a candy bar. I want a candy bar. And as a mom, I'm like, okay, shh, here's a candy bar, right? Here's a candy bar. You can have it. And what have I just taught my child? That them screaming and crying is going to get them that candy bar. That's the consequence, right? What happened? My child saw the candy. They started screaming and asking for the candy. I said no. They started screaming and crying for the candy, and I still gave them the candy, right? So now what happened after that behavior is that I reinforced. I'm rewarding them screaming and crying behavior. Now, there's a lot of different things that we could do as parents, a lot of different things that we could, strategies that we could use in the next time if this happens so that we avoid us doing that. But this is what ABA does. We analyze that behavior. We try to determine what's happening. What is the routine, right? What's happening before, what's the behavior, what's happening after, so that we can come up with a plan to modify these behaviors and eventually get rid of the ones we don't want to see. Now, aside from identifying the A, the B, and the C, we then have to identify the why, the function of the behavior. Now, in the science of ABA, we believe that behavior happens for four reasons: because they want attention of someone or a reaction, because they want to escape or avoid a situation that they don't like, because they want access to something like their iPad or a favorite toy, or it could be an automatic sensory response. For example, when you become itchy, you scratch yourself, right? I can't see that you're itchy, or another person can't see that you're itchy, but you scratching yourself brings some type of internal need. This is what we label as sensory/automatic behaviors. And for a lot of our children or participants that we work with, this could look into hand flapping, covering their ears, maybe doing vocal sounds, maybe running up and down, jumping, spinning in circles. And because it's meeting some type of internal need, right? So in the science of ABA, again, what do? We identify why it's happening, what's triggering the behavior, what does the behavior look like, what's happening after, and then we identify the function. After you identify the function, then you can modify the behavior in a different way. Stay tuned for part number 3 as we talk about replacement behaviors.